So it's Matthew 27, starting at verse 45. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there, watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Samuel. And welcome those coming in. If you haven't yet turned to the Bible, it would be a really good idea to turn to page 999. And what I meant to say, and you won't have seen till the end of the reading there, is as Samuel was reading, listen out for strange things. But if you look again at what he's just read, it says on the screen what the verses were. Matthew 27, 45 to 56. Did you see anything strange that happened there? Anything strange in that reading? Maybe you could call out if you can see something strange. Tell me what was strange. It went dark. Why is that strange? It goes dark every night. It wasn't night, was it? Which verse number are you seeing that in, Barnaby? Verse 45, from noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over all the land. Look at the next slide on the screen. Darkness in the middle of the day. So the Lord Jesus had been fixed to a cross. Here's a cross. We often have these in church symbol to remind us of this very important event. He was there for hours, dying in great pain, and the extraordinary thing happened was that it went dark in the middle of the day. Some people think it might have been a solar eclipse where the moon goes in front of the sun. I don't think it can have been, because it was Passover time, so the sun and the moon are at opposite sides of the earth. I don't know how it happened, whether there was a great cloud of thick dust, or for some reason, somehow, God made the sun stop shining on the whole land at this time when Jesus was on the cross. So, can you see the cross now? I wonder if anyone there, this box actually has a little viewing hole here. Would anyone like to come and have a look and see what it looks like now in there? Would William and James like to come and see? And it's very strange that it went dark in the middle of the day, as though maybe God didn't want everyone to see. Can you see the cross in there? Can you see it in there? It's very dark in there, isn't it? And that's what it was like. Even though it was the middle of the day in a sunny country, suddenly it went very dark. If you'd like to go back to your seats, you can, or if you want to stay up at the front, you can. Sit on the carpet if you want. And light comes from the sun, but symbolically, God is light, and his light shines on us, and suddenly there was no light shining on Jesus. It's a sign that God is, in a way, absent. He's turned away from Jesus. It's a sign of God's anger and withdrawal. Did anyone notice anything else strange in the reading? So, dark in the middle of the day in verse 45. The temple curtain, that's verse 51, isn't it? Thank you, Susan. What a strange thing. We'll come back to that. I just want us to think about something else before that. I think verse 46 is a strange thing. What Jesus cried out, somehow, even though it would have been very difficult to breathe, he managed to cry out in a loud voice. And it actually tells us the exact words he said in his language, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? He was crying out, my God, why? He felt that God had abandoned him. And I think people often feel like that. When bad things happen, sometimes we say, why? Why has this happened to me? What have I done? Or as we're thinking about the suffering of people in Ukraine and the injustice of what's happening there, we cry out, why? Let's all call out what Jesus called there. So it's in the thing there, just the bit in the red box, my God, why? And if we all shout it very loud at the same time, we might get a sense of the terrible cry that Jesus made. So after 3, 1, 2, 3, my God, why? And the Bible tells us something about the reason why. Jesus was crying that not just because he felt that God had abandoned him, but that God really was turning away from him. In the hymn that we're going to sing later, we have these words, on the cross as Jesus died, the wrath of God, the anger of God was satisfied, for every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live. If you imagine that we deserve God's punishment because we have done wrong, and that's like a weight on us. Imagine this hand represents me, and this dark thing represents the weight of my sin and God's punishment for it. I'm separated from God, and that's how we all are because of our sin, until the Lord Jesus comes, who had never sinned, and God wasn't angry with him, but put his anger onto Jesus. Jesus experienced that separation from God on the cross, and that's why he called out, God, why have you abandoned me? And so that, for everyone whose sin is taken by Jesus, leaves no barrier, no punishment. We're free to be in relationship with God. And then the third strange thing, as Susan's mentioned, the temple. There are a few things that happened in the city that I'm putting together as a strange thing. What happened inside the city of Jerusalem? Because the cross where Jesus was dying was outside the city, and down in the city was a very special building called the temple, where people could meet with God. It wasn't the same as a church. It was symbolically where Jesus was, not just a place for people to gather, but symbolically where God was. And in the temple was a very holy place where nobody was allowed to go. And so there was a great curtain in. And that's why we've got, you might have noticed, this curtain hanging here. The church isn't the temple, so it's not that God is up at this end. But if you imagine in the temple was this great curtain separating off the holy place and telling people, no, you can't go in there. And this is just a thin sheet. The curtain in the temple was a thick, woven, heavy thing that was as thick as a man's hand. And so anyone coming to the temple would be reminded, you can't come close to God because you're sinful, God is pure. You need to keep a distance. And when Jesus died, what happened? Over in the temple, in the city, can you see him in verse 52, 51? In verse 51, the curtain in the temple tore in two from top to bottom. And so it was saying, now the separation between God and people doesn't need to be there. The way is open because of what Jesus has done. We can go into God's presence and enjoy relationship with him. Isn't that an extraordinary, astounding thing? And it's such a big thing that's happening that another strange thing everybody noticed who was there in the city was what? Can you see it? Somebody said something then I couldn't hear. The earth shook. So there's an earthquake. And when the earth shook, when all these things happened, people's tombs opened, the graves opened, and isn't that an extraordinary thing that Matthew tells us about? The bodies, verse 52, of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection. So maybe they were raised to life, but they stayed around in those tombs for another couple of days, as Jesus did. They went into the holy city and appeared to many people later. So this huge thing was happening, that death was being defeated by Jesus' death. And so there's a foretaste of resurrection and life to come. And here's another strange thing. The Roman centurion who didn't know the one true God, the God of Israel, those who were with him guarding Jesus, they saw the earthquake and all that happened, and they suddenly realized this very important thing about Jesus. And let's read this out together. They said, "Surely he was the Son of God." They had just put him to death, and now they realize what a huge thing that was, that it was the Son of God dying on the cross. We're going to sing a hymn about that now. There's a green hill far away outside a city wall where the Lord was crucified, who died to save us all. So about these events that happened as Jesus died on the cross, and what it meant that he was dying to save us and enable us to be friends with God. Let's stand and sing.